Hey Dan, how's it going?
Hey, everybody, man. How's it going? How are you?
Good, good. And how are you guys? I hope you're having a lot of fun as we are kicking off your spring. Basically, is all basically here, although it's not so warm here in
I'm pretty
Toronto,
sure
Canada.
not in Toronto or Moscow, but I'm pretty sure. Like, what's not the temperature in Toronto?
Right now, let me check. Actually, oh, it's -3. I thought it's warmer.
Well, I got some good news for you, buddy, because now in Moscow today actually is pretty good. It's sunny and it's +7. So
Nice.
1 for Moscow,
Yeah.
0 for Toronto.
Well,
Sorry about
fair
that, buddy.
point. Fair point. Well, yesterday it was exactly like around 7 or 8, but I actually got
Sorry,
surprised seeing
buddy. Too
negative
late now.
3.
We
Yeah,
already made the calls,
fair
buddy.
point. All right, I concede.
That's right.
Cool. Okay, so today we are going to talk about something a little bit different. I mean, in a sense, and that is the types of relationship and specifics, monogamy, so monogamous relationship, or a polygamy, which are, I have become more interested in these subjects, not in a sense of whether I want to be monogamous or polygamous. More so that I considered for the past few years that there is something but monogamy,
That's right.
which was interesting because I mean at a distance I've been hearing about them, but I didn't really take them seriously. Now I am taking them more seriously. I'm not really educated on the subject. I am just beginning, so we're gonna do that right now. A beginner's course in learning
Wow.
different
We're
types
doing
of
a beginner's
relationships.
course on monogamy. I love that. You'll
Or
never find a beginner's course on anything that ends with gamy. I'm telling you, like no gamies are going to be like in any course whatsoever. So I'm pretty happy about that. I want to talk about monogamy and polygamy as the starting course. Pretty good.
yeah, we got to do it. We got to talk about stuff. There are ideas out
Right.
there, and you know me, I'm interested in talking about different types of ideas. It doesn't mean they're good, it doesn't mean they're bad. We're just going to talk about them, and that's what we're doing today. All right.
Bravo.
So what is your personal experience with these? So when have you? So I mean, obviously, so this is again my assumption, but I feel like we first become familiar not just with the word, but with the concept of monogamy or monogamous relationships because it's just all around us. Probably our parents were in a monogamous relationship, more likely than not. So I'm assuming you got introduced to that type of idea of a relationship first. Would
That's
that be a
right.
fair would that be a fair guess? Is that how it happened?
Well, I'm pretty sure that's a fair guess because
Right.
monogamy is the latest addition to the way we conduct relationships
Right,
throughout
right.
human history. So
2.0.
obviously you're definitely right about this matter, and of course we both have had the experience of having
Right.
loving relationships. So we definitely have had this experience. I do agree with you.
All right, fair point. So now the question is, so I gave a super brief explanation of me becoming interested in these things lately, but what was your story? And probably a little bit in depth. How did you hear? When did you hear about the fact that you don't have? Oh, by the way, let's actually define these things for the people.
Exactly. That was
I
my
doubt
point.
it, but
I feel
yeah.
like it's best to first start off by defining 3 common terminologies that are
Sure,
basically being
go for
thrown around the subject. And these 3 terminologies are 1, monogamy, 2, polygamy, and number 3, polyamory. These are all a little bit different, and sometimes people tend to confuse being polyamorous with being polygamous because these are actually quite different. So let's start off with the easiest of all, which is the most traditional form of relationships, and that is monogamy. So monogamy basically states that 2 people basically are in a relationship, and we're talking about like typical standard relationships. We are not talking about, for example, like homosexual relationships, which are a different topic altogether. We're talking about standard heterosexual relationships between a man and a woman where they decide to actually have a relationship together. And this is going to be done by one condition. And the condition requires both sides to actually commit to what we call sexual exclusivity. Now, what is that? Sexual exclusivity is simply about you being sexually exclusive to your partner. That is, your romantic and sexual life is basically entirely intertwined with one person, and that is your partner. And you expect the exact same from the other side. This means that I will only be with you on a romantic and sexual level, and I expect you to do the exact same thing. This is basically monogamy, which is the foundation for basically all relationships, marriage, and so on and so forth. Then we have what we call polygamy, which is a practice that is still being used in some parts of the world, mainly in the Middle East, especially among the Arab nations. Although personally, since I have some contacts and business interest in two countries in the Middle East, which the Arab-speaking countries, that is, which are Kuwait and Emirates, based upon my understanding, that concept is actually dying out. So the young generation in basically in the streets of, let's say, Dubai or, for example, Kuwait, these people do not actually like to pursue polygamy like their fathers and grandfathers. Now, polygamy simply means that there is a relationship where the women are exclusively somehow involved in a relationship with one man. However, that man has access to multiple women. So this means that the man can choose any woman he wants and any number of women basically that he wants, but the women are basically his wives, which means they have to be in an exclusive relationship only with him. And this is called polygamy. And finally, we have polyamory, or what we call open relationships, which is a new addition to the type of relationship that we have, especially in the West, particularly in countries like Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. It's now quite popular in the United States. I'm pretty sure Canada is not far behind either. So generally in the Western world, the new terminology is called polyamory, or open relationships, easy relationships. These are what we call casual relationships also sometimes, with one major difference between basically polyamory and other types of casual encounters, because a casual sexual encounter does not count as a relationship, because polyamory comes from poly, which means multiple in Latin, and amory, which comes from the word de l'amour in French, which means love. And this means multiple love. Now, the word love implies feelings, emotions, and care. So the terminology polyamory does not mean that you simply go around and screw everything that moves and you just sleep with every single girl or boy. That's not polyamory. That's simply called being promiscuous and being sexually somehow extravagant. Polyamory, rather, implies being in relationships with the people that you care about and know very well, albeit you are not exclusive, and both sides know about this. So understand this. Maybe you're a guy who have a couple of girlfriends and your girlfriends don't know that you have a lot of girlfriends. That's not polyamory. That's cheating, because you have told these people that you are in a monogamous relationship with them, but you're not. So that's called cheating. And cheating basically means you violate the promise that you made to your partner. So if you're somehow in a relationship that is supposed to be monogamous and you are seeing multiple people, obviously you're cheating. So polyamory is not cheating. Polyamory is when both sides know about this in advance, the man or the woman. They talk about this matter. They say, okay, so we're not exclusively involved together. I have other partners. And even sometimes they even share the names and like photos of their other partners. So this is actually called polyamory. So these are the three major topics we've defined so far. And we also define cheating as anything that violates the agreement. So, for example, if someone tells a girl that he wants a polyamorous relationship with her, but secretly he actually wants to marry her, that's also cheating, because he's not being quite honest with a girl about his intentions. So basically, these three are the way we conduct relationships, and these three are quite different. We're not today going to talk about sexual encounters that are casual. We're not talking about promiscuity. We're just talking about three types of relationships. These are like relationships. They're not just mere encounters.
Perfect. And I do apologize. As I told you, I'm a beginner. I did pronounce, so when I said polygamy, I meant polyamory.
That's right. I think you meant polyamory. That's right.
Yeah.
That's the third time.
I just want to clarify what I meant by that. Anyways, so apologies. So yeah, that was super well defined, but better than ever I could say such a thing. I couldn't. So now some people might be like, what the fuck is that shit? I'm not comfortable with that. And I mean, so let me tell you a little bit of a backstory on how it came to me. I mean, again.
Oh boy, I would love to hear. I would love to hear it, man. Let me grab my popcorn. Hold on a second. Let me grab my popcorn. Right.
It's not that exciting. I'm sorry.
Got the ketchup. Let's go.
All right, I'll try. Anyways, so again, these topics would pop out wouldn't pay much attention to them because I mean, I wouldn't take them seriously, basically. And at some point, one of my very good friends who I trust a lot and I listen to, I think he's a great person. Actually, Lars, he was on the podcast too. We had
That's
a podcast.
right.
So
The German guy, right?
yeah. Well, not
That's right.
yeah.
Very nice
So we
guy.
had two
Very nice
German
guy.
people, not Marvin, but Lars.
Marvin and Lars.
Yeah,
That's right. I know both of them, actually. Good
yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah. They're amazing. Anyways, so yeah, Lars came to me and he just came from what do you call it, Burning Man, which some of you might be familiar with. I'm not going to go into details. We have an episode. Just go Google, just go search it. You'll find it. And he talks about that, and talks about other stuff too.
By the way, please name the episode so our listeners can find it. What's the exact name of the episode?
It's okay. I'll announce it in a minute. I'm going to find it.
Bravo. So it's a great episode where basically Pouya interviews Lars in depth. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great. We talk about good stuff. So what he mentioned, he came. So this was last year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So actually, like say 9 months ago, thereabouts. Anyways, so he talks about this thing. By the way, okay, the name of the episode is From Burning Man to Humanity's Rim, a conversation with Lars Nolden is the name of the episode.
Awesome. Yep. It's now available on basically iTunes, Google Play, as well as Podbean. You can go check it out.
Yep. Definitely do. And so, yeah, he came up with that and he was like, yeah, I met a lot of interesting people. They were having different ideas. So he came up with 3 life goals that he came up for himself after the fact, and this was not one of them, that I want to become polyamory. But
right.
He did mention relationship and all that, and then he was like, "Yep, I met so many interesting people, some of them much older than me, etc." And then he brought up this idea to me, and he was like, "Yep, there is such a thing." I was like, "Yeah, but I never took it seriously." He was like, "No, some people are genuinely serious and they're genuinely advocating for it, and they're saying, oh, no, it's amazing." So we talked a little about it, and I was like, "Yeah, interesting. I don't know if I want to do that or I can do that, or etc." And then later on, it became apparent to me more and more, because I had this deep conversation with Lars, that it keeps popping up here and there, and I got more and more interested in it. So I started reading about it a little, listening to some talks and lectures, and it seems viable. Though I gotta say, you gotta do it right. It's not for everybody. Now, I want to hear your input and your, so if possible, I want to hear what was your first encounter, because I feel like these are interesting encounters, because
but
abnormal.
You don't want to know about my first encounter. It was a quickie, and you don't want to know about it. But anyways, what I can tell you right now is this: I personally have had the experience of having both, basically all 3 types of relationships throughout my life. And of course, when I was younger, obviously, as most teenagers basically would tell you, you tend to be a little bit more on the casual side. I mean, it's just normal. The hormones are just way out of control, and you are just looking for whatever basically adventure you can have. So I personally have had the experience with all 3 types of relationships. I have had polyamorous relationships where both sides knew about basically the fact that we are no longer exclusive. I've also been involved for a very short period of time, actually, with polygamy. And of course, for the time being, as of now, actually, I prefer to be monogamous because that's what I've personally decided to do recently. And I will explain why that happened. Because ultimately, when it comes to your basically lifestyle as well as how you feel, generally speaking, everything in life is, I really believe that you should try almost everything that is legal and that does not harm your health at least once in your life. So first, I'm not here like advocating things that are harmful or illegal. I don't know, like drug abuse or reckless driving. I believe that anything that is legal and that is not going to harm your health, you should try it at least once in your life to understand what it is. Now, having said that, I believe that my first encounter with casual relationships was, like most teenagers, rather awkward and without much planning. fortunately, no major incident occurred during my teen years as I was engaged with, let's say, pursuing casual encounters with, for example, the girls. And as I entered basically the adult life, I gradually moved towards polyamory, where I actually wanted to have a relationship because, let's be honest, the fact of the matter is that you can only enjoy having one night stands for so long before it gets boring. I mean, anyone who's ever been, quote unquote, a bad boy would tell you that nothing somehow gets so dried out and so boring more than an attempt to have one night stands after one night stands. Because, of course, if you haven't had these experiences before, obviously you definitely, I believe that if you're young and you're single, why not? Give it a shot. But generally, I personally believe that after a while, after a few such experiences, eventually you start to ask yourself deeper questions about life, about love, and about relationships. And I think that's when you start asking yourself, so what do I want? And for me personally, as I went through the experience, I then decided to actually get serious about my values and know what they are. And for me personally, things like, for example, deep communication, as well as growth and constant development is some of the things that I value very much. Now, a relationship, from my perspective, is like a live organism. That is, it evolves, it grows like a baby, like whatever live organism, even like a pet. So it actually changes. It is under constant, basically, influence by both sides, and it's a very interesting thing. So for that reason, after a while, as I grew basically and became a slightly more mature, I'm not sure if I am mature enough right now, of course, but at least I can try to aim for maturity. I realized that what I prefer slightly more than just having open relationships is to actually have something serious. Now, let's be honest. The male brain is not designed for monogamy. Anybody knows that? And any scientific literature would tell you that the male brain is not monogamous by nature, and it's designed to actually infiltrate as well as impregnate as many women as possible. That's like the evolutionary programming that we have on a DNA level. However, I don't know about you, but like think of like, I don't know, sugar, right?
Yep.
So we are designed to, anything sweet is extremely attractive to us. And the reason for that is very simple, because in our evolutionary history, we did not have a very, solid lifestyle, and having access to anything sweet would have been like very rare. And whenever we had this chance, we had to like somehow indulge that need. So for that reason, we somehow, when we have things like chocolate or sweets, we're just so inclined to have more and more. It goes with almost everything in life, whether it's like fatty foods, which allows us to save fat and survive longer, or many other things. So human biology, from my perspective, as mentioned by many of my mentors, we are not by DNA designed for happiness. By DNA, we humans are designed for survival and reproduction. That is, we are literally, if you look at a human basically DNA on a very molecular level, and basically you realize that the human DNA is basically designed for two things: survive and replicate, like nothing else. So it is certainly not designed for happiness. It is not designed for experiencing the state of being alive or being fulfilled or being in a state of flow, which we talked earlier in one of our podcasts about the state of flow. So the human DNA is not designed for happiness. And that's where the issue comes in. Because for me personally, as you know, I've been studying the subjects of success and happiness for almost a decade now. And at that point, I asked myself, so Dan, what is the right way to experience a higher level of flow in your basically encounters with others, especially with the opposite gender? And that's when I realized that I actually prefer to have a monogamous relationship with one partner, because that exclusivity brings about a lot of other things that almost somehow we cannot get anywhere else. Think about intimacy, think about full trust. And even if you look at the concept of sexuality from a medical perspective, I was talking to one of my students. She's a surgeon and she's also a medical professional. So she was telling me that with every additional sexual encounter, you are, doubling or tripling your chances of STDs, that is sexually transmitted diseases. Wow. Or also nowadays it's called STIs, sexually transmitted infections, or something like this. So generally, I personally believe that if you look at this from a psychological perspective, our need for growth, need for intimacy, and our need for somehow becoming involved in something that grows over time, as well as the biological factors, the health factors, and the hygiene factors, which implies that the fewer sexual partners we have, the healthier basically that thing is, and the longer we live, and the fewer STIs or STDs we will actually somehow have problems with. So when you put it all together, then I told myself, no problem. I think it's much better to actually go for monogamy. However, with all of that being said, we had this discussion actually the other day with one of my Russian, basically, friends, and she said that I don't believe there is such a thing as friendship between men and women. And I told her that I do believe that it's actually possible. So while I do support monogamy, I am against couples putting borders and fences around each other and say, okay, you only talk to me and only to me. So I believe that trust is an important factor in monogamous relationships. So you want to have a monogamous relationship with trust that allows both sides to still communicate with the other members of the opposite gender, if they so desire, with full trust, knowing that it doesn't matter how much time we spend with other basically people, we still love each other and we're still together and we're still in a monogamous relationship. So that was basically my personal story that I have discovered so far, and would like to actually share more with you in the basically coming minutes of our podcast.
Yeah, for sure. That was a lot of interesting material covered. So that's one of the things that people on the polyamory side were talking about, the notion that, so first of all, why is not the relation, from your friend's point of view, why would not a friendship between a guy, if it were literally friendship, be possible? I mean, it seems to me, I don't know her, I don't want to judge anybody or anything. It just seems to me that this comes from a position of jealousy that somebody might have. She
Probably.
might have been, dealing with guys who have cheated on her or something like that. And this is, obviously it's going to bother you. And you're like, yep, any person that I know, yeah, they can't not think of women as sexual objects. In terms of guys. So I get it, but I don't think it's necessarily healthy. So again, I'm trying to play devil's advocate. I have no horse in this game right now.
That's right.
So the polyamory people will tell you that, you know what, we don't get jealous. Or at least they like to claim, or at least that's the agenda here on the table. And that's why I initially said, again, polyamory people will tell you that it's not for everybody. You got to have you got to have a certain emotional intelligence toolkit to be able to deal with these things. First of all, you don't have to be jealous, or at least not severely. Then the less is manageable. Anyway, so this is on their side, and that was interesting. So to me, though, when I was trying to stomach it, I was like, you know what? If I really like somebody, like you said, I want to devote and dedicate a lot of time that I have extra to my work or hobbies or whatever to share with that one person, because I really care about her, right? So that should be the idea. And again, devil's advocate, well, not devil's, polyamory's advocate. But you get to do that at the same time, spend some time with other people. So let me be clear, by the way. So the type that got me, okay, this makes sense in polyamory, was that you have one main partner, as in monogamy, but then every now and again you have other encounters with some other people, each of you, the girl and the boy. Back to the story. And I was like, you know what? There's one fundamental problem here. Let's say you have 10 hours per week, say, that you're spending with your partner, exclusively with your partner. Now, if I'm in a polyamory with one main partner, now I'm spending 9 hours with her, 1 hour with somebody else. So it diminishes that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying if I really am into someone, I want to spend more time with them as much as I can, as much as the life allows, etc. So this was my struggle a bit. Though I try to keep an open mind and I try to listen more and learn more, though I think it is very much possible for some people, but I think it really depends on the people. So what do you think on that? Is it possible for anybody and everybody, the polyamory, or is it aimed at certain groups of people with certain aptitudes and toolkits?
Of course, as you yourself know, think like marriage, for example, right? I don't think there's any such thing. One of the key principles in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, is that there are no such things as universal solutions. There are universal principles or laws, but never universal solutions, because each individual solution is oftentimes different than the others. And if you look at marriage, for example, right now, in the US at least, I'm going to talk about the statistics in the United States. So in the US, almost half of marriages end in divorce. And unfortunately, at some point, three-fourths, that is 75% of the couples, admit to have cheated on one another. So if you look at just the statistics right here, you can understand that no, not everything is for everyone. So just like marriage is not something that can actually work with everyone, the same thing applies to polyamory or polygamy. So for that reason, I agree with you completely. I do not believe that polyamory is for everyone because let's be honest, some people really all they care about is to, for example, just be in a sexual relationship and they don't really care so much about the emotional details. On the other hand, we have those who are heavily emotionally dependent on their partners. You can say to this guy, all right, no problem. So you're now in a polygamous relationship or you're now in a polyamorous relationship. And now you're going to see your, for example, girlfriend getting banged by some other guy. So this is definitely not acceptable for such a man. All right. So because of that, I don't believe that polyamory is for everyone. I don't even believe that polyamory is for the majority of people because, let's be honest, the concept, first of all, is very new. And I believe that there are also a lot of cultural factors. So if you think about, for example, polyamory, we have still a lot of very traditional cultures around the world that value many things that have been somehow proposed for centuries. And because of that, I don't believe that polyamory is, first of all, for every nation, nor do I believe that it's actually for everyone in those nations that it's currently being practiced. So for that reason, I believe that it should be used only for the type of people who perhaps, as you mentioned yourself, have certain emotional makeup that allows them to see relationships as nothing more than friendship plus sex. And maybe that's for them. Very good. I personally do not like this approach to relationships because I do believe that emotions do matter. And I highly value the state that we get from our relationships because every relationship is a source of what we call an NLP state. It allows you to boost your, like when you, for example, call someone that you love. Because one of my friends actually fell in love last year with basically his partner. And he was describing for me a lot of things. He said and he, by the way, was a quote unquote bad boy. And he met this girl and he actually fell in love with her. And he was telling me, Dan, 1 minute with her is better than like all the other girls I've ever had before. And our intimate moments are so much more valuable and they're quite different than what I experienced before. So when you think of it that way and you think of the emotional value that comes from deep relationships that are heavily loving and caring, then obviously there are many people who can benefit from this. But understand this, that also just like polyamory isn't for everyone, monogamy isn't also for everyone, marriage isn't for everyone. We all have to ask ourselves, what are our desires? What are our values in life? What do we want to have? And then make a plan accordingly. For some of us, marriage is indeed the best option. It will always be. For the others, marriage might not be the right approach. Perhaps you should try to be in, let's say, monogamous relationships as boyfriends and girlfriends without ever going for marriage because of, for example, the emotional makeup. For some people, relationships is just not for them. Maybe they are extremely left brain type of people who are very logical and perhaps they don't even need a relationship. They just need someone to talk to and perhaps spend some time with. In that case, perhaps you can actually opt for the other options. But ultimately, as you said yourself, this is a very personal subject and it must be answered based upon the inclinations, desires, and values of the person who would actually like to choose what type of relationship is best for him or her.
Fair point. And I think now that you said that, I think if one thing I take out of this conversation today, that would be the fact that we just need to open our mind to different possibilities and realize that, as you said, not everybody has the same wirings. You might be flourishing amazingly in polyamory, but you might be flourishing amazingly in monogamy. And that's the point. Like, you gotta figure out who you are and what you're going to do. And I really like what you early on said, that if it's not harmful to you or anybody, if it's not illegal, do it, experience it, and learn. Because there is a degree that there are types of things and degree of learning that you get out of reading or listening to lectures or whatever. There is a whole different ballgame of learning when it comes to actually experiencing your whatever that is that you want to learn. So, for example, if you want to play soccer, and I tell you, read this book, you're going to become Ronaldo. That's not going to happen. You got to actually touch the ball.
Exactly.
So
Otherwise, this ball, we're aiming their football here, definitely.
oh yeah. No, don't touch that ball.
No monogamy ball here. We're just talking about football here.
Exactly, right? By the way, funny concept. Why is American football called football? While they're holding it with hands, and then
That's exactly one of the biggest mysterious problems. And we call soccer. It's pretty weird, I know.
Anyways,
But let's be honest. In football, we do have a part where we do
Fair point.
Use our legs.
Yeah.
So it's not always with hands. We do
Right.
use our foot in some parts of football. But for the most part, yes, you're right. It's with the hands.
Yeah, but the poster child is the guy holding the ball in his arms and running for his life.
Exactly. Right.
Anyways, okay. That was a tangent here. I don't want to get carried away. I actually lost my train of thought. But then the gist of it is that you want to experience things, you want to learn, and we want to keep an open mind. So maybe maybe 2 years ago, if you would tell me, yep, I'm in a polyamorous relationship, maybe I would judge you. I'm not too sure I wouldn't. So maybe we need not to judge people as hardly as we do as a society these days. Again, you're right. There are different cultures, there are different aptitudes, there are different countries, there are different norms. I'm mainly obviously talking about the Western culture, particularly in United States, Canada, as you mentioned. And so maybe we need to a little bit loosen up and learn there are different types of things, and some of them are good for some people, some of them aren't. Simple as that. Now, do you have any other final, comments or thoughts?
Well, obviously, as we mentioned today, we have to look deeply inside of ourselves and find out, what do we want from our relationships? What is our goal? I really believe that, as we've mentioned again and again throughout this podcast, we have to be goal-oriented. We have to know what we want, where we are going, and what is our target in life. And once we know that, then it becomes a lot easier to make decisions. And decisions that we make regarding our relationships are perhaps the most important and consequential decisions that we've ever basically are going to make in our lives, because as is proven basically throughout various psychological research, ultimately relationships are the most important and the heaviest components of our lives. So if you right now remove all of your relationships, just imagine, there's a great part in one of my most favorite movies of all time, which I am fanatic about, called Up in the Air. And there's a great part in that movie where, this movie, by the way, it stars George Clooney. And there's a great part where the main protagonist talks about relationships. And he says, put all of your relationships, put them in a luggage and just burn that and just see what happens. When you think about this, if you take away all of your relationships from your life, first of all, your life loses a tremendous amount of meaning. And secondly, it feels a lot emptier, which means that relationships perhaps are the most important and the heaviest components of your lives. And for that reason, you got to make the good decisions. You should know exactly who you are. And more importantly, from my perspective, because I'm not a fan of just jumping right away into monogamy and just marrying the first girl you see and that's it. Because let's be honest, when we are younger especially, we need to experiment. We need to see things and understand who we like. I don't know about you basically, Puchix, but I'm pretty sure you had similar experience where when you were, let's say, 17 or 18 or 19,
right,
you did not really know what kind of girl you wanted to marry and be with.
Oh, no, I had no clue.
You actually knew that, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is this, I personally did not know that. And I had to experience different relationships until I realized, this is what I like, this is what I dislike, and this is what I appreciate in a woman, this is what I don't appreciate. So once I find a person that has more of what I like in a woman based on my last experience and less of what I don't, then
Right.
I know that that's a good match. Because ultimately, choosing a life partner, let's say you want to talk about marriage, for example,
Yeah.
it's one of the most critical decisions of your life. And if you make a wrong decision, it'll be very difficult. I mean, just right now,
Yeah.
think about the divorce of Jeff Bezos. I mean, we
Right.
just earlier talked about Amazon. I just ordered some books on Amazon, and I was really satisfied by a fantastic job. So Amazon now is one of the largest companies in the world. Its founder, Jeff Bezos, is the wealthiest man alive with a net worth exceeding of $140 billion.
Yeah.
And guess what? He wants to get a divorce after 25 years of marriage. And guess what? How much do you think that divorce will cost him? $70 billion.
It's
This
insane.
is a mistake that has to be corrected earlier on. Why did you marry a woman that you did not fully understand who she is? What's her background? Are you really basically a good match? So a lot of these mistakes can be corrected early on if we, first of all, have enough experience before marriage to know what kind of behaviors we like and we don't. And more importantly, to have the experience to try a lot of these things. Because trust me, I think after a while, things might get really boring. If you are, for example, not in a loving relationship, that's when getting into a relationship might actually change things for the
Yeah.
better. To do that, obviously, we need a lot of experience. So I'm encouraging the younger generation to actually think about this matter. So yes, you might fall in love right now and think like you've found the love of your life and you'll be married and then you'll be divorced 2 years later. That's not very good. So before jumping in, I recommend you guys to actually try to know who you are and through some experience, realize what types of behavior and personality in a woman do you like? And then only then make a good decision for your future. And for that, of course, you will definitely require to have a lot of experience. So this is why I believe that you must have experience before you actually go for serious relationships or for marriage.
You couldn't be more right about my case because the kind of person that I thought I like at the time is not even in the top 10.
Exactly. This is because you have the experience, because you have seen it. You have
Yep.
seen different behaviors, and now you know which one. This one really, like, for example, for myself, I really enjoy talking about, for example, books and
Right.
talking about interesting subjects with my partner. Many girls don't like to talk about, for example, esoteric stuff or
Cool shit, I call 'em.
or these things, or cool shit, as you put it, right? But I personally did. I could have never understood it until I, for example, found someone that I could talk to about these subjects. So these are the things that you have to consider. And if you put them all together, you realize that by having the experience, you will know that oftentimes your earlier assumptions about what is a good girlfriend or wife or what's a good husband or boyfriend is actually wrong. And through experience, you can know what kind of partner you want to have, whether you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah, and we do change, like specifically with the teenage ages, we do change a lot from that.
Exactly.
Like that's the point of chaos, and then you start converging on a person. So you don't fucking know it. Like like I have the same taste as you do. I like to talk about cool shit with my partners, and I find that one of the most satisfying parts of it. So. But at the time, when I was 17 or 18, I didn't know any cool shit, or I wasn't reading as many books as I am today. So I didn't even know I like to do this because I didn't. So we changed too. Like and we got experience our changes, experience our lives. I couldn't agree with you more. That's a perfect a conclusion to our talk here because we are running out of time. Damn it. All right. And there's a good discussion to be had on marriage and sustainable relationships, and mainly monogamous we're talking here now. So we can have that on another episodes soon, hopefully. We'll see. And anything to sum it up?
Well, overall, it was a very great episode. We talked about different types of relationships. We explained what is polygamy, what is polyamory, and what is basically monogamy. And we also talked about why it is important for us to first discover who we are, what our values are, and know what exactly we find interesting in the opposite gender. And as we both put it out, we can never understand what we like in our partner unless we actually have the experience of dating basically a few partners to realize which one actually is what we like, which is why it's important if you're younger. It's much better to actually explore your options. And I'm so much against early marriage. that you cannot even begin this process. I sometimes see people as young as 20 or 19 are getting married in the 21st century. Please, guys, get a life. You're not at an age, because unfortunately, it's a fact. Let's be honest. The level of maturity of the younger generation is much less than it was, even though the young generation are now bombarded with information every single day. In terms of maturity and life responsibilities, most young generations don't have a clue, which is why I recommend basically the younger generation who are now listening to us to actually explore their options, to get involved in basically friendships or multiple relationships at the early stage of their lives, to know what type of basically partner they find appealing. And only then it's best actually later on to actually go towards monogamy, because once you find the right partner and then you commit to a monogamous relationship, I do believe that there's going to be a lot of growth and a lot of success and happiness will be the result of that. They say behind every successful man, there is a woman. And some men would say there are multiple women, but it really depends on who you are, really. It depends on who you are. But the fact of the matter is that whether you are a girl or a boy, your relationship with your partner becomes a great source of motivation, a great source of drive. I know a lot of basically, started to use the term losers, who after getting married, their lives changed completely. They became a lot more mature. They started earning a lot more money, and they actually started accumulating a lot of things. But before that, they did not. So that's why I believe that this really depends on the person. Some people really need those responsibilities created by marriage to become somebody. And without it, they will be nobody. So to those people, I say, you definitely want to tap into the power and the motivation and the drive created by being in a relationship with the opposite gender, because that will give you the winning edge in terms of conquering all the big challenges in life on the way to success and prosperity.
Hands-on experiences, guys. Hands-on experiences. Let's do it. Listen,
although
Dan.
Sometimes they'll tell you the hands off, but that happens sometimes, buddy. Don't worry about it.
Good point. Listen, Dan, this was awesome. It's always a pleasure chatting with you and, brainstorming. Love it.
The pleasure's mine, buddy.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for you guys for tuning in. As always, love to hear your feedbacks. And until a later episodes, have a goodie.